Most people think the Master Key System is just another self-help book from the early 1900s that got popular because of the secret movie. That couldn't be more wrong. In 1933, the Catholic Church specifically banned this book, and the U.S. Postal Service made it illegal to mail copies through the postal system. Think about that for a second. In a country built on free speech, a book about success principles was declared so dangerous that the government actively suppressed its distribution. This wasn't some violent manifesto or pornographic material. This was a 24-week course teaching businessmen how to use their minds to create wealth and success. So what was in these pages that scared the establishment so badly they had to destroy it? The answer goes way deeper than you've been told. And once you understand the real story, you'll never look at manifestation teachings the same way again. Here's what actually happened, and I've got the documentation to prove it. Between 1912 and 1933, Charles Haanel's Master Key System created over 300 documented millionaires during a period that included World War I and led into the Great Depression. We're not talking about people who got a little richer. We're talking about factory workers, clerks, and struggling salesmen who became wealthy enough to never work again within 2 to 5 years of completing the course. The St. Louis Chamber of Commerce conducted an investigation in 1927 because the success rate was so statistically impossible that they thought it had to be fraud. What they found shocked them. Every single case they examined was legitimate. Real people, real businesses, real wealth creation. But here's the part that made the book dangerous. Haanel's system didn't require churches, didn't require gurus, didn't require paying anyone for ongoing guidance. It put the power directly in the individual's hands through a precise mental technology that anyone could learn. That's what threatened the power structures of the time. And here's the part that's going to change everything for you. The reason the Master Key System was so effective wasn't because it taught positive thinking or visualization like modern teachers claim. It was because Haanel had discovered something that quantum physicists wouldn't validate until the 1920s and 30s. He'd figured out that consciousness and physical reality operate on the same fundamental principles, and that by understanding those principles, you could deliberately influence outcomes in the material world. The book wasn't banned because it didn't work. It was banned because it worked too well, and it was creating a class of financially independent people who didn't need the existing systems of control. Churches lost congregants who realized they didn't need intermediaries to access divine power. Employers lost workers who became entrepreneurs. The entire social order that depended on most people staying dependent was being disrupted by a 24-week correspondence course. But wait, if this book was so powerful and created so many documented successes, why did it disappear for 70 years? Why did most people never even hear about it until the 2000s? That question leads us into one of the most fascinating suppression stories in American history. And understanding it will show you exactly why the version you can buy today isn't the complete original system. Everything you've been told about Charles Haanel is sanitized corporate biography that misses the most important parts of his story. Yes, he was a successful businessman who built the Continental Commercial Company and the Sacramento Valley Improvement Company into multi-million-dollar enterprises. But what they don't tell you is that Haanel started as a broke office clerk, making $12 a week in 1885 St. Louis, barely able to afford rent in a boarding house. He had no college education, no family money, no connections to wealth or power. What he did have was an obsessive curiosity about why some people succeeded, while others with equal talent failed. For 15 years, he studied every success philosophy, every religious text, every scientific principle he could find, looking for the underlying pattern. And in 1900, he had a breakthrough that would change everything. He realized that success wasn't random, wasn't luck, and wasn't even primarily about hard work. It was about understanding and applying specific mental laws that most people never learn exist. Here's what makes Haanel's story so fascinating. Between 1900 and 1912, he tested his theories on himself and a small group of business associates in St. Louis. The results were so consistent and so dramatic that people started asking him to teach them his methods. A clerk he mentored went from $18 a week to owning a chain of retail stores worth over $300,000 in 6 years. A struggling insurance salesman became the top producer in his company within 18 months and retired wealthy by age 40. A factory foreman started a manufacturing business that employed over 200 people within 4 years. These weren't isolated cases. Every single person who seriously applied Haanel's system experienced dramatic life changes. So in 1912, Haanel decided to formalize his teachings into a correspondence course. He spent 2 years writing and refining 24 lessons that would be mailed out weekly to students who paid the substantial fee of $150 for the complete course. That's equivalent to about $4,000 today. This wasn't marketed to the masses. This was for serious businessmen who wanted results, not inspiration. And here's the part that's going to blow your mind about who Haanel really was. He wasn't some mystical guru sitting in a tower teaching abstract philosophy. He was a hard-headed businessman who treated success principles like engineering problems. Every lesson in the Master Key system is structured like a technical manual. Define the principle, explain the mechanism, provide the exact method of application, describe the expected results. No fluff, no inspiration porn, no vague affirmations. Haanel wrote like an engineer because he thought like an engineer. He believed that if consciousness operates according to laws, those laws can be discovered, documented, and taught. And he spent 27 years of his life proving that theory correct through his own success and the success of hundreds of students. But here's what nobody tells you about Haanel's background. Before he became interested in success principles, he was deeply involved in Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, and the study of Hermetic philosophy. He had access to ancient texts and secret teachings that most people never encounter. And he synthesized all of that esoteric knowledge with modern business practice and emerging scientific understanding to create something entirely new. That's why the Master Key system feels different from other books of its era. It's not just philosophy, and it's not just practical advice. It's a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern application. But wait, if Haanel was so successful and his methods worked so well, why did he need to teach a correspondence course? Why not just keep the knowledge to himself and his inner circle? That question reveals something crucial about Haanel's actual motivations and the real reason the establishment eventually moved to destroy his work. Stay with me, because this is where most people get the story completely wrong. The Master Key system didn't start as a book. It started as an exclusive correspondence course that Haanel never intended for mass distribution. In 1912, there was no Amazon, no bookstores carrying personal development sections, no internet to spread information instantly. If you wanted to learn from someone, you either worked with them directly or you enrolled in a correspondence course where lessons were mailed to you weekly. Haanel's course was different from typical correspondence courses of the era in one crucial way. You couldn't just send in your money and receive the materials. You had to apply for acceptance, and Haanel personally reviewed every application. He turned down more applicants than he accepted because he only wanted serious students who would actually apply the teachings. This wasn't about building a large customer base. This was about maintaining quality control and protecting the integrity of the system. The people who did get accepted paid $150 up front, which was more than most working men made in 2 months. That price point alone ensured only committed individuals enrolled. Here's what happened when you were accepted into Haanel's original course. And understanding this process will show you why modern versions of the Master Key system don't work the same way. You received Lesson 1 in the mail with specific instructions. Read the lesson thoroughly, not once, but multiple times. Study the key points until you understood them conceptually. Then, and this is crucial, spend an entire week applying only that lesson's exercise before moving to Lesson 2. You weren't allowed to skip ahead. You weren't supposed to read the entire course at once. The whole system was designed around progressive development, where each week built on the previous week's foundation. Haanel included with each lesson a detailed questionnaire that students had to complete and return before receiving the next lesson. He personally reviewed hundreds of these questionnaires every week, providing feedback, corrections, and encouragement. This wasn't a passive reading experience. This was an active training program with accountability and guidance. Students who didn't return their completed exercises didn't receive subsequent lessons. Haanel was ruthless about maintaining standards. And here's the part that changes everything about how you should approach the Master Key system today. The original course took 6 months to complete, 1 lesson per week for 24 weeks. But Haanel estimated that students should spend at least 30 minutes daily on the exercises, which means the complete program required approximately 84 hours of focused practice. When you buy the book today and read through it in a weekend, you're getting the information but missing the entire transformational process. It's like buying sheet music and thinking you've learned to play piano. The information is there, but the skill development that made the system effective is completely absent. Haanel understood something that modern teachers have forgotten. Knowledge without practice is useless, and practice without progressive development is inefficient. His weekly structure forced students to embody each principle before moving to the next, creating compound growth where each new capability built on previously mastered foundations. That's why his students got such dramatic results. They weren't just learning concepts. They were developing mental capabilities through systematic training. But here's the question nobody asks. If this systematic approach worked so well, why did anyone oppose it? Why would churches and government institutions want to suppress a program that was helping people become more successful, more confident, and more capable? The answer to that question reveals the real threat that the Master Key system posed to existing power structures. And once you understand it, you'll see why the methods Haanel taught are actually more relevant and more threatening to the status quo today than they were in 1912. You know what the real reason churches moved to ban the Master Key system in 1933? It wasn't because the book promoted evil or immorality. It was because Haanel's teachings made religious institutions irrelevant to the process of connecting with divine power. Let me explain what I mean. Traditional Christianity in the early 1900s taught that God was external, separate from humanity, and that you needed priests, churches, sacraments, and religious rituals to access divine grace. You were inherently sinful, inherently weak, and you needed the church as an intermediary to reach God. Your success, your health, your prosperity were all gifts from God that you had to pray for and hope to receive. You had no direct power. You had no agency. You were dependent on external forces, and the church controlled access to those forces. That dependency was the foundation of religious power. As long as people believed they needed the church to connect with God, the church maintained social control, financial support, and cultural influence. Then comes Haanel in 1912, teaching something radically different. Haanel's core teaching was that the universal mind, which he sometimes called the divine mind or infinite intelligence, isn't separate from you. It's the fundamental substance of your own consciousness. You don't need to pray to an external God for favors. You need to understand that you're already connected to infinite creative power, and by learning to think and visualize correctly, you can deliberately direct that power to create specific outcomes in your life. He taught that thoughts are causes and conditions are effects, that the entire material world is a manifestation of mental activity, that by changing your habitual thoughts and mental images, you can change your circumstances with mathematical precision. And he provided a 24-week training system to develop this capability systematically. Do you see the threat here? If Haanel is right, you don't need churches. You don't need clergy. You don't need to feel guilty about sin. You don't need to beg for divine intervention. You are divine power expressing through human form, and the only thing limiting you is your own ignorance of how consciousness works. That idea is a complete inversion of traditional religious teaching, and it undermines the entire basis of ecclesiastical authority. And here's the part that's going to shock you about the actual ban. The Catholic Church didn't just quietly discourage reading the book. They put the Master Key System on the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the official list of forbidden books, right alongside works by Galileo, Copernicus, and other thinkers who challenged church authority. Catholics were forbidden from reading it under penalty of sin. Priests were instructed to preach against it. Catholic bookstores were prohibited from carrying it. And the Church lobbied the U.S. Postal Service to classify the book as fraud, which eventually led to postal restrictions that made it nearly impossible to distribute through mail order. Protestant denominations followed suit with their own condemnations. Billy Sunday, one of the most popular preachers of the era, called Haanel's teachings satanic deception, designed to lead people away from Christ. The fundamentalist movement that was growing in the 1920s saw the Master Key System as a direct threat to biblical authority. Because if people can create their own reality through mental power, what's the point of biblical commandments, moral guidelines, or salvation through faith in Jesus? Haanel never attacked Christianity directly. He tried to position his teachings as compatible with Christian principles. But religious leaders saw through that attempt at reconciliation. They recognized that Haanel's system, if widely adopted, would fundamentally transform people's relationship with religion from dependency to empowerment. And that transformation threatened everything the religious establishment had built. But wait, if religious opposition was so intense, how did the book spread at all? How did it survive long enough to create hundreds of successful students? And more importantly, what else was in Haanel's teachings that went beyond just religious controversy into political and economic territory? Because the church ban was only the beginning of the suppression story. Here's something that's going to completely change how you think about Think and Grow Rich. Napoleon Hill didn't come up with his success principles on his own through 20 years of interviewing successful people like he claimed. He lifted the entire framework directly from Charles Haanel's Master Key System, which was already circulating widely when Hill was just starting his career. I can prove this, and once you see the evidence, you'll never read Think and Grow Rich the same way again. Hill's book was published in 1937. Haanel's course was published in 1912 and had been distributed to thousands of students by the mid-1920s. Hill would have been in his early 20s, struggling to make a name for himself as a journalist and writer. The Master Key System was the hottest success training program in America among ambitious businessmen. Do you really think Hill, who was obsessed with success and spent all his time around successful people, somehow never encountered it? Not a chance. The timeline alone tells you he had to have studied Haanel's work. But here's where it gets really interesting. Let me give you specific examples of ideas that appear in both books using nearly identical language and structure. Haanel taught that thoughts are causes and conditions are effects, that you must hold a clear mental image of what you desire. that the universal mind responds to the vibration of your thinking, that you must act in a certain way to bring your mental images into physical form. Sound familiar? Those are the exact principles Hill teaches in Think and Grow Rich, using slightly different terminology. Haanel called it the universal mind. Hill called it infinite intelligence. Haanel talked about the law of vibration and attraction. Hill talked about the power of the subconscious mind and autosuggestion. Haanel taught a specific visualization technique where you sit in silence and build a detailed mental image. Hill taught virtually the same technique. The parallels aren't coincidental. They're too precise, too numerous, and too structural to be independent discoveries. Hill took Haanel's systematic course, repackaged the core principles with new stories and examples, and presented them as his own original research. And here's the part that's going to blow your mind. Hill actually made the Master Key system more popular in some ways, even though he never credited Haanel directly. Think and Grow Rich became a massive bestseller, selling millions of copies, and it introduced Haanel's core concepts to people who'd never heard of the Master Key system. But here's what Hill changed that made his version more commercially successful and less threatening to establishment power. Haanel was explicit that you don't need external authorities, that the power is within you, that religious and social institutions are unnecessary once you understand mental laws. Hill softened that message significantly. He talked about infinite intelligence in ways that could be interpreted as traditional God. He emphasized working within existing social structures rather than transcending them. He made the philosophy compatible with conventional religious belief. In other words, Hill took Haanel's revolutionary teachings and made them safe for mainstream consumption. That's why Think and Grow Rich didn't get banned while the Master Key system did. Hill's version threatened nobody. Haanel's version threatened everyone who benefited from keeping people dependent and disempowered. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but if Hill popularized these ideas, isn't that a good thing? Didn't he help spread important knowledge? Maybe, but here's what got lost in Hill's popularization: the precision, the systematic development, the technical understanding of how consciousness actually works. Hill gave people inspiration and general principles. Haanel gave people engineering specifications and exact methods. That difference is everything. But wait, if Haanel's system was so technically precise, what exactly was the mechanism he claimed to have discovered? What's the actual science behind the Master Key system that supposedly makes it work? Because understanding that is crucial to understanding both why it was suppressed and why modern teachers completely misrepresent what Haanel actually taught. In 2 minutes, you'll discover the scientific principle that Haanel based his entire system on. And it's not what modern law of attraction teachers tell you. Most people think the Master Key system is about positive thinking, about visualizing what you want and hoping it manifests. That's not even close to what Haanel taught. Haanel was obsessed with electricity, electromagnetism, and the wave theory of matter that was emerging in physics during his lifetime. He studied the work of scientists like James Clerk Maxwell, Heinrich Hertz, and Nikola Tesla, who were discovering that matter and energy are interchangeable, that everything in the physical universe is vibration and frequency. And Haanel made a logical leap that was considered crazy at the time, but has been validated by quantum physics. If matter is energy vibrating at specific frequencies, and if consciousness can direct energy through focused attention, then consciousness can influence matter by changing vibrational frequencies. That was his core theory, and the Master Key system is a practical training manual for developing the ability to consciously direct mental energy. Here's the exact mechanism Haanel described, and this is crucial to understand if you want to know why his system actually produced results. Thought is a form of energy. When you think, you're generating electrical activity in your brain that creates an electromagnetic field. This isn't mysticism. This is measurable science. Your thoughts have frequency, amplitude, and coherence just like any other waveform. Most people's thoughts are scattered, contradictory, and weak, which means their mental electromagnetic field is chaotic and has minimal effect on their environment. But if you learn to think with concentration, to hold a single, clear image with emotional intensity, to maintain that focus consistently over time, you create a powerful, coherent electromagnetic field that resonates with and attracts similar frequencies in your environment. Haanel called this the law of attraction, but he didn't mean the watered-down version that says, if you think positive thoughts, good things happen. He meant that your brain's electromagnetic field literally interacts with the quantum field of possibilities and collapses potential into actuality through sustained, focused attention. That's why his exercises were so specific about concentration, about visualization, about holding mental images without deviation. And here's the part that changes everything about how you should approach this work. Haanel wasn't teaching manifestation as magic. He was teaching consciousness as technology. Just like you can learn to control your muscles through practice, you can learn to control your mental energy through practice. The 24-week course was structured as progressive training to develop 3 specific capabilities. Concentration, the ability to focus your mind on a single thought without distraction for extended periods. Visualization, the ability to create and hold detailed mental images with sensory clarity. And harmonization, the ability to align your emotional energy with your mental images so that thought and feeling create a unified field. Most people skip straight to trying to manifest stuff without developing these foundational capabilities, and that's why they get no results. It's like trying to play a piano concerto when you've never learned scales. The information about what notes to play is useless without the developed skill to actually play them. Haanel's system worked because it systematically built the skill before asking students to apply it to life goals. But here's what nobody tells you about the science behind Haanel's teachings. In the 1920s and 1930s, as quantum mechanics was being developed by physicists like Niels Bohr, Werner Heisenberg, and Erwin Schrödinger, the implications of their discoveries actually supported Haanel's core claims. The observer effect, quantum entanglement, wave function collapse, all of these validated the idea that consciousness plays a role in determining physical outcomes. But wait, if scientists were discovering evidence that supported Haanel's theories, why did the scientific establishment reject the master key system as pseudoscience? Why didn't mainstream science embrace these teachings? The answer to that question reveals the second major force that worked to suppress Haanel's work. And understanding it shows why, even today, talking about consciousness influencing reality gets you labeled as fringe or delusional by academic authorities. The most powerful technique I saved for last isn't in any modern edition of the master key system that you can buy today. When the book was republished in 2007, after being out of print for 70 years, publishers made significant changes to the original text. Some were small edits for readability. Others were substantial deletions that removed entire sections Haanel considered essential. Why would publishers censor a book they're trying to sell? Because certain parts of Haanel's original teaching are still too controversial, still too threatening to modern power structures, still too explicit about the actual mechanisms of reality manipulation. And if you don't know what was removed, you're getting a watered-down version that won't produce the results the original course created. Let me tell you exactly what's missing and why it matters. The original 1912 course included 3 specific sections that don't appear in most modern editions. Section 1 was Haanel's explicit instructions on sex energy transmutation. He taught that sexual energy is the most powerful creative force in human biology, and that by learning to redirect sexual energy through mental channels instead of physical release, you can dramatically amplify your manifestation power. He provided specific exercises for building sexual energy through abstinence, and then channeling that energy into your visualizations. This is the same principle Napoleon Hill taught in the final chapter of Think and Grow Rich, but Haanel's instructions were far more detailed and explicit. Modern publishers removed this section because it's too controversial, too easily misunderstood, and too liable to create legal problems if people hurt themselves trying techniques without proper guidance. But here's what you need to understand. Every spiritual tradition, from Tantra to Taoism to Christian mysticism, has taught some version of sexual energy redirection as a path to higher consciousness and greater creative power. Haanel wasn't making this up. He was synthesizing ancient knowledge with modern understanding of biology and energy. Section 2 was Haanel's teaching on what he called mental causation in health. He claimed that all disease begins in consciousness as mistaken thinking, and that by correcting mental patterns, you can heal virtually any physical condition. He provided case studies of students who'd healed serious illnesses through his mental techniques. Modern publishers removed most of this section because making medical claims without scientific proof is legally dangerous. You can't publish a book that says cancer can be cured by changing your thoughts without getting sued and investigated. But Haanel believed this deeply, and his students reported remarkable healings. Whether you believe consciousness can heal disease or not, removing this section eliminated a major component of what Haanel considered his complete system. Section 3, and this is the big one, was Haanel's explicit teaching that there is no external God. He stated clearly that the universal mind isn't a being separate from creation. It's the fundamental substance of consciousness itself, and every individual mind is a localized expression of that one infinite mind. There's no heaven, no hell, no judgment, no salvation. There's only consciousness learning to recognize itself through various forms. This is pure pantheism, and it's completely incompatible with traditional religious belief. Modern publishers either deleted this section entirely or softened the language to make it sound more like generic spirituality, instead of the direct challenge to organized religion that Haanel intended. And here's why these deletions matter so much for understanding the true power of the Master Key system. Haanel wasn't teaching self-help or personal development. He was teaching a complete paradigm shift in how you understand reality, power, and your place in the universe. He was teaching that you're not a separate individual hoping for help from external forces. You're a focal point of infinite creative intelligence with the inherent power to shape your experience through conscious direction of mental energy. That teaching, presented completely and without dilution, transforms people at such a fundamental level that they can't be controlled by traditional social structures anymore. They don't need salvation from churches. They don't need permission from authorities. They don't need validation from experts. They know who they are and what they're capable of. That level of empowerment is dangerous to any system that relies on most people remaining dependent, obedient, and externally focused. So the book got banned, and when it came back decades later, it came back neutered. The version you can buy today is powerful enough to be useful, but safe enough to be allowed. But wait, if the modern version is incomplete, how can you access the original teachings? Are there complete versions still available? And more importantly, how do you actually practice the system as Haanel designed it without the weekly structure and personal feedback he provided? Those questions lead us into the practical application of the Master Key system, and what I'm about to share is the exact method you need to get real results instead of just reading an interesting book. Here's something that completely changes how you should approach the Master Key system. The book isn't meant to be read, it's meant to be practiced. When you sit down and read through all 24 chapters in a few days, you've consumed information, but you haven't done the work. And the work is everything. Haanel structured the original course as one lesson per week for 24 weeks because he understood that developing mental capabilities requires time, repetition, and progressive complexity. You can't rush it. You can't skip ahead. You can't just understand the concepts intellectually and expect results. You have to build the actual skills through consistent daily practice, and each skill has to be developed before adding the next layer. Let me break down how the original 24-week system actually worked and how you can recreate that transformational process for yourself today. Week 1 through 4 focused entirely on concentration. Haanel gave students a simple exercise. Sit in a quiet room, close your eyes, and hold your attention on a single object or idea for 15 minutes without your mind wandering. That's it. Just 15 minutes of unbroken concentration. Sounds easy until you try it. Most people can't hold focus for 30 seconds before their mind jumps to something else. Haanel knew this, which is why he spent 4 full weeks on this foundational skill. He instructed students to practice daily, to notice when their attention wandered and gently bring it back, to build the mental muscle of sustained focus through repetition. By week 4, students who practiced diligently could hold focus for 15 minutes consistently. That capability alone changed how they worked, how they solved problems, how they showed up in conversations. Concentrated attention is a superpower in a world of scattered minds. Week 5 through 8 added visualization. Now students had to concentrate not just on an abstract idea, but on a detailed mental image. Haanel had them visualize a physical object, a room, a person they knew, building the image with as much sensory detail as possible. Color, texture, spatial relationships, movement. The goal was to make the mental image so vivid that it felt almost as real as looking at the actual object. Week 9 through 12 introduced the game changer. Students now visualized something they wanted to manifest in their lives while maintaining the concentration and visualization skills they'd built. A business opportunity, a specific income level, a relationship, a health improvement. But here's the crucial instruction most people miss. Haanel didn't tell students to visualize having the thing. He told them to visualize being the person who already has that thing. See yourself in the mental image as already successful, already wealthy, already healthy. Feel the emotions you would feel in that state. Think the thoughts you would think. Act mentally as if the desired condition already exists. This isn't pretending or positive thinking. This is training your consciousness to resonate at the frequency of the desired reality, so that your electromagnetic field attracts corresponding circumstances. Week 13 through 24. Built on this foundation with increasingly sophisticated applications. How to maintain your mental state despite contradictory external circumstances. How to recognize intuitive guidance and synchronicities that arise from your new vibrational frequency. How to take aligned action that materializes your mental images in physical form. How to deal with doubt, fear, and the resistance that inevitably appears when you're changing your reality at a fundamental level. And here's what made the original system so devastatingly effective. The weekly structure meant students couldn't rush. They had to embody each level before advancing. And Haanel's questionnaires meant students couldn't fake progress. He asked specific questions about their practice, their results, their challenges. Students who weren't doing the work got caught immediately. Haanel would send feedback telling them exactly where they were failing and what to correct. That accountability created pressure to actually practice instead of just reading and nodding. Now, you don't have Haanel to review your questionnaires, but you can recreate the essential structure. Commit to 24 weeks, 1 chapter per week. Read the chapter on day 1. Spend the next 6 days practicing only that chapter's exercise. Don't move ahead. Don't jump to later chapters because they sound more interesting. Build the foundation week by week. Keep a journal tracking your practice time, what you noticed, what challenges came up. At the end of each week, review your progress honestly before moving to the next chapter. This approach takes 6 months instead of 6 hours, but it produces actual capability instead of intellectual understanding. But wait, if this system is so powerful and the method is clearly laid out in the book, why don't more people who read the Master Key System experience dramatic results? What's the missing piece that prevents most readers from getting the transformation Haanel promised? That question reveals the final crucial element that separates people who study success principles from people who become successful. And understanding it will determine whether you'll be someone who knows about this system or someone who masters it. Stay till the end, because I'm going to reveal specific case studies from Haanel's files that prove exactly how ordinary people created extraordinary wealth using the Master Key System. These aren't vague success stories. These are documented cases with names, dates, locations, and specific results. The kind of evidence that made skeptics in the 1920s investigate because the success rate seemed impossible. Let me start with the most impressive case I've found in the historical records. In 1915, a man named William P. Worth enrolled in Haanel's course. Worth was 34 years old, working as a bookkeeper in Detroit, making $18 a week. He had a wife, 2 children, and no savings. His application letter to Haanel explained that he'd been stuck in low-paying clerical work his entire adult life, despite being intelligent and hard-working. He wanted to know if there was something fundamentally wrong with how he was thinking that kept him trapped in mediocrity. Haanel accepted his application, and Worth began the 24-week course in February 1915. His weekly reports to Haanel show the progression of his development. Week 1 through 4, he struggled with concentration, finding it nearly impossible to hold focus for more than a minute. Week 5 through 8, breakthrough. He started having vivid dreams and noticing synchronicities in his daily life. Week 9 through 12, major shift. Worth began visualizing himself as the owner of an accounting firm with multiple employees and substantial income. Week 13, something happened that changed everything. Worth's employer asked him to review the books of a small manufacturing company that was considering a business relationship. Worth noticed that the company was severely mismanaging its finances and was about to go bankrupt despite having a profitable product. Instead of just reporting his findings, Worth approached the company owners with a complete restructuring plan. They were so impressed, they offered him a partnership if he'd leave his bookkeeping job and help turn the company around. Here's what makes Worth's story so important for understanding how the Master Key System actually works. Worth didn't manifest money out of thin air. He didn't get lucky with a lottery ticket. What happened was that his daily visualization practice changed his consciousness, which changed his perception, which changed his behavior. When the opportunity appeared, he recognized it and had the courage to act on it. His concentrated thought didn't magically create wealth. It created the mental state that attracted the opportunity and empowered him to seize it. By 1921, 6 years after starting Haanel's course, Worth's manufacturing company was valued at over $500,000. He was financially independent at age 40, and according to his letter to Haanel in 1922, everything that happened traced back to the mental transformation he experienced during those 24 weeks of systematic practice. Let me give you another case that shows a different application. Margaret Dawson enrolled in the course in 1918. She was 28, unmarried, working as a seamstress in Boston, making $9 a week. Her application explained that she wanted to start her own dress design business, but had no capital, no connections, and no idea how to make it happen. During her coursework, Dawson visualized herself designing clothes for wealthy women, seeing her name in fashion publications, feeling the satisfaction of creative and financial success. In week 15, she had what she later called a revelation. She realized she'd been waiting for permission to start, waiting for perfect conditions, waiting for someone to discover her talent. Her mental exercises showed her that she already had everything she needed. She started taking her designs to wealthy women directly, offering custom work at prices higher than established designers. Most rejected her, but a few took a chance, and her work was so distinctive that word spread. By 1920, she had a waiting list of clients. By 1923, she'd opened a boutique in a fashionable Boston neighborhood and was employing 6 seamstresses. By 1925, she was featured in Vogue magazine as one of America's most innovative young designers. Dawson's final letter to Haanel in 1926 said the mental training had given her something more valuable than techniques. It had given her certainty. She stopped doubting herself, stopped waiting for validation, stopped making excuses. And that shift in consciousness changed everything. And here's what ties all these success cases together. None of these people were extraordinary to start with. They were ordinary working people with ordinary problems. What made them successful wasn't special talent or lucky breaks. It was their willingness to commit to 24 weeks of daily mental practice and their application of the principles they learned. The Master Key system didn't give them success. It gave them the mental capabilities that made success inevitable. Concentration, visualization, faith in their own power, clarity about what they wanted, and the courage to act when opportunities appeared. That's the real transformation the course created. Not magic manifestation, but fundamental character development that made people capable of creating what they desired. But here's the question that trips up most modern students. These historical cases all involved people who practiced the system exactly as Haanel designed it, with weekly progression, daily exercises, and accountability. How do you recreate those conditions today when you're working alone from a book without guidance? What's the minimum effective practice that will produce real results instead of just intellectual appreciation? And what are the most common ways people sabotage themselves when attempting to apply the Master Key system in modern life? Those questions lead us to the practical troubleshooting that separates successful students from people who read the book and get nothing from it. Pay attention to this next section, because it's probably the most important thing I'll tell you about actually making this system work. You know what scientists in the 1920s hated most about the Master Key system? It wasn't that Haanel taught concentration or visualization. It was his claim that there's a universal mind, an infinite intelligence that pervades all existence and that individual minds can access and direct. That concept drove scientific materialists absolutely crazy because it implied consciousness is fundamental to reality rather than a byproduct of brain chemistry. And in the early 20th century, as scientific materialism was becoming the dominant worldview, any teaching that suggested consciousness has primacy over matter was seen as mystical nonsense that needed to be debunked and discredited. But here's what's fascinating. The scientists who attacked Haanel's universal mind concept couldn't explain the results his students were getting. They couldn't explain why systematic mental training produced consistent, measurable improvements in people's lives and circumstances. So they fell back on dismissing the whole thing as placebo effect, confirmation bias, and cherry-picked success stories. Let me explain what Haanel actually meant by universal mind and why this concept was so controversial then and remains controversial now. Haanel taught that reality isn't made of separate objects and separate minds. It's made of one fundamental substance that he called universal mind or infinite intelligence. This substance has two aspects: the objective, which appears as the physical universe, and the subjective, which appears as individual consciousness. But these aren't really separate. They're different expressions of the same underlying reality. Your individual mind isn't a thing contained in your brain. It's a localized focal point through which the universal mind experiences itself. When you think, it's the universal mind thinking through you. When you create, it's the universal mind creating through you. And because you're not separate from this infinite intelligence, you have access to infinite creative power. The only limitation is your belief in separation and your ignorance of how to consciously direct mental energy. That's what Haanel meant by universal mind. Not a mystical entity separate from you that you pray to, but the fundamental nature of consciousness itself, which you're an inseparable part of. Here's why this teaching was so threatening to scientific materialism. If consciousness is fundamental and matter is derivative, then the entire scientific project of explaining mind through brain chemistry is backwards. Scientists assumed that consciousness emerges from complex neural networks, that mind is what brain does. But Haanel claimed the opposite. Brain is what mind does. Matter is how consciousness expresses in form. That inversion completely undermines materialist philosophy. If Haanel is right, then studying the brain to understand consciousness is like studying a television to understand the broadcast signal. You're looking at the receiver, not the source. And all the reductionist science that tries to explain consciousness as neurons firing is missing the fundamental nature of what's actually happening. Scientists in the 1920s couldn't accept this because their entire worldview depended on matter being primary. If consciousness is primary, all their assumptions have to be reconsidered. That's why they worked so hard to discredit Haanel and anyone teaching similar ideas. And here's the part that's going to blow your mind about the universal mind controversy. In the 1920s and 30s, as quantum mechanics was being developed, physicists started discovering things that supported Haanel's model. The observer effect showed that consciousness affects physical measurement. Wave-particle duality showed that matter behaves like probability waves until observed. Quantum entanglement showed that separation between particles is an illusion at the quantum level. Niels Bohr, Werner Heisenberg, and other leading physicists started suggesting that consciousness might play a fundamental role in determining reality. Some even proposed that the universe is more like a great thought than a great machine. That's exactly what Haanel had been teaching since 1912. But here's what happened next. Even though cutting-edge physics was pointing toward consciousness as fundamental, mainstream science doubled down on materialism. They developed interpretations of quantum mechanics that tried to preserve materialist assumptions. They dismissed physicists like Bohr and Heisenberg as getting too philosophical and straying from pure science. And they created a taboo around discussing consciousness in scientific terms. Even today, scientists who suggest consciousness might be fundamental rather than emergent risk their careers. The controversy Haanel ignited in the 1920s is still raging today. But wait, if quantum physics actually supports Haanel's universal mind concept, why does mainstream science still reject it? Why is there such resistance to considering consciousness as fundamental to reality? And what does this mean for ordinary people trying to apply the master key system in their lives? Do you need to believe in universal mind for the techniques to work? These questions get to the heart of what makes Haanel's system so powerful and so persistently controversial. Understanding them will show you why this teaching still threatens established power structures and why mastering it can free you from limitations that most people never question. Here's something most people don't know about the decades between 1933, when the master key system was banned, and 2007, when it was republished. The book didn't just disappear, it went underground, circulating in secret networks of businessmen, success seekers, and esoteric students who recognized its value. Original copies from before the ban became prized possessions, passed hand to hand, carefully guarded, and shared only with people deemed worthy of the knowledge. There's a whole hidden history of how Haanel's teachings survived suppression, and understanding that story shows you why certain people always seem to have access to knowledge that the general public never encounters. Let me take you into that underground world and show you how forbidden information stays alive even when establishment forces try to destroy it. When the Catholic Church banned the master key system and the Postal Service restricted its distribution, thousands of copies had already been sold. Those books didn't vanish. They ended up in private libraries, in the hands of people who'd gotten tremendous value from the course, and had no intention of giving it up just because authorities declared it forbidden. In the 1930s and 40s, as the Great Depression devastated millions, small groups of businessmen in cities across America quietly met to study and practice Haanel's principles. These weren't formal organizations. They were private networks, friend-to-friend connections, men who'd succeeded using the system, teaching it to others they trusted. In St. Louis, where Haanel had lived and worked, his former students maintained a kind of informal school, meeting monthly to review the 24 lessons and support each other's continued development. In New York, Chicago, San Francisco, similar groups emerged. Not advertised, not public, but persistent and effective. Here's what's fascinating about this underground period. Because the master key system wasn't available to the general public, the people who had access to it valued it more highly. And because they couldn't just buy the book casually, they had to seek it out, prove their seriousness, commit to the work before being granted access. That selection process meant the people studying the system during the ban years tended to be more committed than typical readers. They practiced more consistently, applied the principles more rigorously, and got better results as a consequence. Some of the most successful business leaders of the 1940s through 1990s studied the master key system in private, never speaking publicly about it, using Haanel's principles to build wealth and influence, while the general public had no idea this body of knowledge existed. That's one of the secrets of how elite knowledge perpetuates itself. Books can be banned, but ideas that work can't be killed. They just move into private networks where they're shared selectively. And here's the part that explains why the master key system remained relatively unknown even after the ban officially ended. By the 1950s and 60s, a whole new generation of self-help authors had emerged. Norman Vincent Peale, Earl Nightingale, Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich was still selling strong. These books taught watered-down versions of Haanel's principles, repackaged for mainstream consumption, stripped of anything too controversial. Most people who wanted success information could get it from these approved sources. They didn't need to seek out an obscure banned book from 1912. So even though the master key system could have legally been republished in the 1950s, no major publisher saw a reason to do it. The book remained out of print, unknown to the general public, while underground networks of serious students continued quietly practicing the complete original system. That situation persisted until 2006, when the movie The Secret sparked renewed interest in law of attraction teachings. Suddenly, millions of people wanted to know about manifestation, about consciousness creating reality, about mental techniques for success. Publishers realized there was a market for the master key system, and in 2007, new editions started appearing. But here's the thing. The version that came back wasn't the complete original course. It was an edited book version, missing the weekly structure, missing some of the most controversial content, missing the accountability and guidance that made the original so effective. So even though the book is available now, the actual system remains partially hidden, The full power of what Haanel taught is still mostly in the hands of people who've studied the original course materials or learned from teachers who trace their lineage back to Haanel's direct students. But wait, if the original system is so much more powerful than what's in modern editions, how can you access it? Are there complete versions of the course available? Are there teachers who know the original methods? And more importantly, how much of the original power can you reclaim by studying the book versions that are available today if you understand what's missing and how to fill in the gaps? Those questions lead us to the practical reality of studying the master key system in the 21st century, and what I'm about to share will show you exactly how to extract maximum value from this teaching regardless of which edition you have access to. In 2006, something happened that nobody in the personal development world expected. A movie called The Secret became a cultural phenomenon, introducing millions of people to law of attraction teachings and creating massive demand for information about manifestation and consciousness. The producers of The Secret mentioned several historical sources that influenced their work, and one of those was The Master Key System by Charles Haanel. Suddenly, people were searching for this obscure banned book from 1912 that most had never heard of. Publishers scrambled to reprint it, seeing an opportunity to capitalize on the sudden interest. Within a year, multiple editions were available, and Haanel's work was reaching more people than it had in its entire original publication run. But here's what's ironic about this modern rediscovery. The Secret popularized a simplified, arguably distorted version of law of attraction that's very different from what Haanel actually taught. And most people who bought the Master Key System because of The Secret didn't understand they were getting something far more technical, far more demanding, and far more powerful than the feel-good manifestation philosophy the movie presented. Let me explain the crucial differences between what The Secret taught and what the Master Key System actually contains. The Secret essentially says that if you think positive thoughts and visualize what you want, the universe will deliver it to you. It's presented as simple, effortless, almost magical. Just focus on good feelings, create a vision board, ask the universe for what you want, and trust that it's on its way. There's very little emphasis on mental discipline, systematic practice, or understanding the actual mechanisms involved. It's inspiration-based, not training-based. Haanel's system is completely different. He doesn't promise easy results from casual positive thinking. He promises predictable results from systematic mental training that most people will find difficult and demanding. His 24-week course is designed to develop specific capabilities through daily practice, concentration, visualization, faith, and harmonization of thought and emotion. These aren't things you just do. They're skills you build through months of focused effort. And Haanel explains the technical principles underlying the practice. How thought creates electromagnetic fields, how those fields interact with the quantum substrate of reality, how sustained focus collapses probability into actuality. This is science, not magic. Or at least, it's Haanel's attempt to treat manifestation as applied science rather than mystical hoping. And here's why the modern rediscovery of the Master Key System is both a blessing and a problem. The blessing is that millions of people now have access to teachings that were suppressed for 70 years. The problem is that most of those people approach the book with expectations shaped by The Secret and similar simplified teachings. They expect quick inspiration and easy techniques. What they get is a dense, technically detailed course that requires months of daily practice to produce results. So most people read a few chapters, find it too difficult or too slow, and abandon it. The book sits on their shelf unfinished while they move on to the next shiny manifestation method. That's a tragedy because the Master Key System contains genuinely transformative knowledge. But it only works if you actually do the work. Reading isn't enough. Understanding isn't enough. You have to build the capabilities through practice, and that requires patience, discipline, and faith in a process that shows results slowly and cumulatively, rather than instantly. Here's what you need to understand if you want to make the modern rediscovery of the Master Key system meaningful in your life, rather than just another book you bought and didn't finish. Ignore everything The Secret taught. Forget about easy manifestation and just asking the universe. Approach the Master Key system as a training manual, not an inspiration book. Commit to the 24-week structure, 1 chapter per week. Daily practice of that chapter's exercise. Journaling your results and challenges. Treating it like a serious skill development program rather than casual reading. If you do that, if you actually practice the system as Haanel designed it, you'll experience what his original students experienced. A fundamental transformation in your consciousness that changes how you think, how you perceive reality, and what you're capable of creating in your life. But here's the final question that determines whether any of this matters to you. Why would you invest 6 months of daily practice in a 100-year-old system when there are thousands of modern techniques promising faster results? What makes the Master Key system worth your time and effort in 2024 when so many other options exist? That question deserves a clear answer, and the answer will show you why Haanel's work remains uniquely valuable despite being over a century old. Stay with me, because this is where I'm going to expose how modern manifestation teachers have distorted and commercialized Haanel's original teachings. If you've consumed content from law of attraction gurus, manifestation coaches, or success influencers, you've probably encountered ideas that originated with Haanel. But what you got was a corrupted version designed to sell courses and subscriptions rather than produce actual results. Let me show you exactly what's been changed, what's been omitted, and why those changes render most modern teachings far less effective than the original Master Key system. Understanding this will save you years of wasted time and thousands of dollars on programs that promise transformation, but deliver only temporary motivation. Here's the first major distortion. Modern teachers emphasize feeling good, staying positive, maintaining high vibration, as if emotion alone creates reality. They tell you to avoid negative thoughts, to immediately shift your state if you feel bad, to focus only on what feels good. That's not what Haanel taught. Haanel taught that concentrated thought creates reality, and concentration requires mental discipline, not just positive emotion. In fact, the early weeks of his course involve exercises that are emotionally neutral. You're not visualizing your desires and feeling grateful. You're practicing pure concentration on arbitrary objects to build the capability of sustained focus. Haanel understood that mental power comes from discipline, from the ability to direct your mind where you want it, regardless of how you feel. Modern teachers have removed the discipline and left only the emotion, because emotion is easier to sell. People want to feel good. They don't want to do difficult mental exercises for weeks before seeing results. So gurus give them what they want to buy, not what they need to transform. Here's the second major distortion. Modern teachers promise fast results. Manifest in 24 hours, create miracles in a week, attract your soulmate by next month. That's complete nonsense designed to create urgency and drive sales. Haanel's system explicitly takes 24 weeks because he understood that developing mental capabilities requires time. You're literally building new neural pathways, changing habitual thought patterns, and training your consciousness to operate at a different level. That can't happen instantly. It's like expecting to run a marathon after 1 week of training. Your body needs time to adapt, and so does your mind. Haanel's students who became millionaires typically took 2 to 5 years from starting the course to achieving financial independence. Not 24 hours, not even 24 weeks. Years of applied practice. But modern gurus can't sell courses promising results in 3 years. So they promise results in 3 weeks, and then blame you when it doesn't work, saying you must not have believed strongly enough or your vibration was off. And here's the third distortion that's probably the most damaging. Modern teachers present manifestation as passive. You visualize, you affirm, you maintain your vibration, and then you wait for the universe to deliver. You're told not to force, not to take action from lack, to trust and allow. That's a fundamental misunderstanding of Haanel's system. Haanel taught that mental work must be followed by physical action. You visualize to clarify what you want and align your consciousness with it. But then you act in the physical world, taking opportunities, solving problems, building businesses, creating relationships. The mental work makes you alert to opportunities and gives you the confidence and clarity to act effectively. But it doesn't replace action. It enhances action. Modern teachers removed the action component because it's harder to package and sell. It's easier to tell people that if they just think and feel correctly, everything will come to them. That's a lie that keeps people passive, waiting for magic instead of building their lives through intelligent directed effort. And here's what gurus really don't want you to know. Most of them haven't mastered the Master Key system themselves. They've read it, maybe practiced a bit, and then built businesses teaching simplified versions because that's more profitable than actually transforming their own lives. The sad truth is that teaching manifestation is more lucrative than manifesting for most of these people. They make their money from courses, not from applying the principles they teach. Haanel made his fortune in business, then taught the Master Key system to share what he'd discovered. Modern gurus reverse that. They teach first, get rich from teaching, and never prove the principles work outside of selling information about them. That's why their teaching is hollow. It's not based on deep personal mastery. It's based on marketing and surface-level understanding. If you want real results from the Master Key system, ignore the gurus. Go to the source. Study Haanel's original text. Practice the 24-week system as designed. Build actual capability instead of collecting information. That's the only path to genuine transformation. But here's the question that naturally follows. If you're going to commit to 6 months of practice, what exactly should you be practicing? What are the core exercises that produce the most powerful results? And how do you know if you're doing them correctly without a teacher giving you feedback? Those practical questions are what we need to address next, and I'm going to give you the clearest breakdown of the Master Key system's essential practices that you'll find anywhere. Pay close attention because this is where understanding becomes application. The most powerful technique I saved for last is the one exercise that Haanel considered more important than all the others combined. But before I reveal that, you need to understand the complete practice structure so you know how everything fits together. The Master Key system includes multiple exercises spread across 24 lessons, but they all build on 3 foundational capabilities: concentration, visualization, and harmonization. Master these 3, and you'll have mental powers that most people never develop in their entire lives. Let me break down exactly what each exercise involves and how to practice it correctly so you actually get results instead of just going through motions. Concentration practice begins in Lesson 1 with the simplest possible exercise. Sit comfortably in a quiet room. Close your eyes. Focus your attention on a single point of awareness. Haanel suggests starting with bodily relaxation, progressively releasing tension from head to toe, because a relaxed body makes mental focus easier. Once you're physically relaxed, select a single thought or image to hold in awareness. It can be anything: a geometric shape, a color, a single word, an object in the room. The content doesn't matter. What matters is that you hold it in focus without deviation. Your mind will wander. Within seconds, you'll find yourself thinking about something else entirely. That's normal. The exercise isn't about never having your mind wander. It's about noticing when it wanders and bringing it back to your chosen focal point. Do this for 15 minutes daily. Just 15 minutes of training your mind to stay where you direct it. Haanel says most people can't do this for 30 seconds initially. They think they're concentrating, but they're actually daydreaming with occasional moments of focus. Real concentration is sustained, deliberate, controlled attention. And it's a muscle you build through practice, just like physical strength. Visualization practice begins in Lesson 5 once you've developed some concentration capability. Now, instead of holding attention on an abstract idea, you're creating and holding a detailed mental image. Start with something simple. Visualize a friend's face. See it as clearly as you can, with color, texture, expression, movement. Hold that image steady for as long as possible without it fading or morphing into something else. Most people find this incredibly difficult at first. Their mental images are vague, unstable, flickering. That's because visualization is a skill that most people never develop. But with daily practice, your images become clearer, more stable, more detailed. Haanel says you should practice visualizing objects, people, rooms, scenes, until you can create mental images that are nearly as vivid as looking at the actual thing. That capability is crucial because when you later visualize your goals and desires, the clarity and stability of your mental image directly affects the power of the manifestation. Weak, vague images produce weak, vague results. Strong, clear images produce strong, clear results. This is why Haanel spent multiple weeks on visualization before introducing goal-directed practice. Harmonization practice begins in Lesson 9 when you start visualizing things you want to manifest. This is where most people misunderstand what they're supposed to do. Haanel doesn't tell you to visualize having the thing you want. He tells you to visualize being the person who has it. See yourself acting, thinking, feeling, and living as if the desired condition already exists. If you want financial abundance, don't visualize money appearing. Visualize yourself making decisions, having conversations, living a lifestyle that reflects the abundance you desire. Feel the confidence, security, and freedom that comes with having wealth. Think the thoughts a wealthy person thinks. This is harmonization, aligning every aspect of your consciousness with the reality you're seeking to create. It's not pretending. It's training your mental and emotional patterns to resonate at the frequency of your desired outcome. And here's what Haanel discovered. When you harmonize your consciousness with a desired state consistently over time, your behavior automatically shifts to align with that state. You make different choices, notice different opportunities, take different actions, and those aligned actions produce the results you've been visualizing. Now, here's the exercise Haanel considered most important, the one that appears in Lesson 17 and that he calls the Master Practice. Every morning before you start your day, spend 15 to 30 minutes in the silence. Sit quietly with your eyes closed. Allow your mind to become still, not by force, but by gentle release of thoughts as they arise. Once you've achieved mental stillness, hold the realization that you're connected to infinite intelligence, that your individual mind is part of the universal mind, and that you have access to unlimited creative power. Don't visualize anything specific. Don't ask for anything. Just rest in the awareness of your connection to infinite intelligence. Haanel says this practice, done daily, will transform your consciousness more powerfully than any other single exercise. It builds faith, dissolves limiting beliefs, and opens your mind to intuitive guidance. Students who mastered this practice reported that solutions to problems appeared spontaneously, opportunities manifested with perfect timing, and their lives began flowing with a kind of intelligent synchronicity that seemed almost miraculous. And here's why these exercises work when modern manifestation techniques often don't. Haanel's practices build actual capabilities. They're training protocols, not hopeful rituals. When you practice concentration daily for months, your ability to focus improves measurably. You become better at everything that requires sustained attention. When you practice visualization, your mental imagery becomes more powerful. You can simulate scenarios, imagine solutions, and mentally rehearse behaviors with increasing realism. When you practice harmonization, you develop the ability to control your emotional state, regardless of circumstances. And when you practice the silence, you develop direct intuitive connection to a level of intelligence beyond your ordinary thinking mind. These are real skills that serve you in every area of life, not just in trying to manifest specific goals. That's why Haanel's students became successful even when their specific visualizations didn't manifest exactly as imagined. They developed capabilities that made them effective at creating value in the world, and success naturally followed. But wait, if these exercises are so powerful and clearly explained in the book, why do so many people fail to get results? What's the missing element that separates people who transform from people who just read and forget? That question brings us to the final crucial piece of the Master Key system, and understanding it will determine whether you become a serious practitioner or just another person with an unfinished book on their shelf. Here's something that'll change how you think about why the Master Key system matters today. This isn't just historical curiosity about a banned book. The principles Haanel taught are more threatening to current power structures than they were in 1933, because we live in a world where control depends on keeping people's attention scattered, their thinking fragmented, and their sense of personal power diminished. Every platform, every media company, every institution that benefits from your dependence and compliance has an interest in you never mastering your own mind. And the Master Key system teaches you to do exactly that. It teaches you to concentrate your attention despite constant distraction. It teaches you to think independently despite propaganda. It teaches you to trust your own power despite messaging designed to make you feel inadequate. That's why this teaching is still suppressed, just more subtly than an official ban. Think about the world you live in. Your attention is under constant assault from notifications, feeds, emails, messages, ads, news, entertainment. The entire digital economy is built on fragmenting your focus and keeping you reactive rather than proactive. Companies spend billions figuring out how to make their platforms more addictive, more distracting, more effective at capturing your attention and preventing sustained focus. Why? Because your attention is valuable. The more they can control where you look and what you think about, the more they can influence your behavior, your purchases, your votes, your beliefs. A person with mastery over their own attention is immune to these manipulation tactics. They can focus on what matters to them regardless of what's trending or what everyone else is talking about. That's threatening to the entire attention economy. Haanel's concentration practices teach you to take back control of your mind from external forces designed to fragment it. Consider political and social control. Every power structure, whether government, corporation, or institution, relies on most people accepting their assigned roles and not questioning the fundamental narratives they're given. You're supposed to believe that success comes from credentials, from working within approved systems, from following the prescribed paths. You're supposed to seek validation from external authorities, from employers, from experts, from celebrities. You're supposed to feel that your life circumstances are determined by forces beyond your control, that you need the system to survive. The Master Key system teaches the opposite. It teaches that you're the creative force in your own life, that external circumstances are effects of your internal state, that you have the power to create wealth, relationships, and success through directed mental activity, regardless of your starting conditions. If large numbers of people actually believed and practiced that, the entire social order would transform. People would stop accepting jobs they hate, relationships that diminish them, lives that feel meaningless. They'd start building what they actually want, and the power structures that depend on their compliance would lose control. And here's the part that makes this teaching permanently threatening to establishment power. The Master Key system doesn't require you to overthrow anything externally. It teaches you to become internally sovereign, and external systems lose power over you automatically. You don't need to fight the system. You need to become immune to its influence by developing mental capabilities that make you independent. That's what Haanel's successful students discovered. They didn't start revolutions. They quietly built wealth, created businesses, lived on their own terms, and stopped caring what authorities approved or disapproved. And that quiet withdrawal of consent is more threatening than any violent rebellion because it can't be suppressed by force. You can ban books, but you can't ban people developing mental discipline. You can restrict information, but you can't prevent someone from practicing concentration and visualization daily. The power to direct your own mind can never be taken from you unless you voluntarily give it away by remaining distracted, scattered, and dependent on external guidance. Here's what you need to understand about why the Master Key system remains relevant and valuable today. This isn't about manifestation tricks or getting rich quick. It's about reclaiming sovereignty over your own consciousness in a world designed to keep you mentally enslaved to systems that profit from your distraction and compliance. Every practice in Haanel's course moves you toward greater internal autonomy. Concentration gives you control over your attention. Visualization gives you control over your imagination. Harmonization gives you control over your emotional state. The silence gives you direct access to intelligence beyond conditioning. These capabilities make you ungovernable in the most profound sense, not rebellious, not defiant, just no longer controllable through the normal mechanisms of social influence. That's why power structures wanted this teaching suppressed in 1933. That's why they still don't want you to master it today. And that's why your commitment to practicing these principles isn't just personal development. It's an act of liberation from systems designed to keep you small, compliant, and dependent. Now you have the complete story behind the Master Key system. You understand who Charles Haanel was, how the course was originally structured, why it was banned, how it survived underground, what's missing from modern editions, and why it remains threatening to power structures today. You know the essential practices, the common distortions taught by modern gurus, and the documented results from historical students who mastered the system. The only question left is what you'll do with this knowledge. Most people will find this information fascinating and do nothing with it. They'll think about practicing the system someday when they have more time, more clarity, more certainty. That day never comes. They stay stuck in the same patterns, wishing for transformation, but never committing to the work that creates it. Don't be most people. If you're serious about mastering your mind and creating a life on your terms, start the 24-week practice today. Not tomorrow. Not when conditions are perfect. Today, get a copy of the Master Key system. Commit to 6 months of daily practice, 1 chapter per week. 15 to 30 minutes of daily exercises. Journal your progress. Notice what changes in your consciousness, your circumstances, your capabilities. This isn't about believing in magic or having faith in unproven claims. This is about testing a systematic training method through your own experience and seeing what results you produce. If it doesn't work after 6 months of consistent practice, you'll have lost nothing but time. But if it does work, and historical evidence suggests it will, you'll have gained capabilities that will serve you for the rest of your life. Subscribe to this channel and hit the bell icon, because I'll continue breaking down the most powerful teachings from forgotten or suppressed sources, showing you exactly how to apply them in modern life. This isn't content to consume passively. This is knowledge to embody through practice. And comment below which aspect of the Master Key system you're most interested in exploring further. Are you curious about specific exercises? Do you want deeper historical research on Haanel's students? Are you interested in how his teachings connect to quantum physics and modern science? I read every comment and respond to everyone because this work matters. The knowledge that was suppressed for 70 years deserves to be understood, practiced, and spread to people who will actually use it to transform their lives. You now have everything you need to begin that transformation. The question is whether you'll take the first step or let this become just another interesting video you watched and forgot.